Good evening, podcast listeners. It's once again time for a Daring Fireball presentation of the Talk Show Live. We're coming to you from Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference 2019. And now, the man we've all been waiting for, John Gruber.
Welcome to the Talk Show. I am John Gruber, your internet friend. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. I am that guy. I'm the guy who came out on stage with a device with a beta OS. And it is going off. Hold on. All right. It's a little buggy. My blue cards. All right, before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsors, without whom this show would not be possible. First sponsor, longtime sponsor of this show, Mac Stadium. They do Mac infrastructure. They host Macs. I don't know if they heard any good news on the keynote. I haven't talked to them this week. I mean, I know they're around, and I know there's some of their fine folks that are in here. But they have over 20,000 Macs in data centers around the world. They are ready for all Mac deployments, including Mac Minis, iMacs, even Xserves. Am I missing something? John, what am I missing? Mac Pro. Rack mountable. They are heavily invested in security, scalability, and support for iOS and Mac development, having a server where you can do builds, all sorts of useful stuff you guys know about. They're a great company. This week they're announcing Orca. That's Orca with a K, and it stands for orchestration with Kubernetes, which I was going to pronounce Kubernetes. And I checked, and they said Kubernetes, and I thought, you know what, I should have just pronounced it wrong. It would have been more on brand. I don't know why I asked. But it's the only way to do native Kubernetes commands, which I have no idea what that is, to create and orchestrate macOS VMs on genuine Apple hardware. It is also super fast. So for more information and exclusive discounts for you fine folks who are listening, go to macstadium.com/thetalkshow. macstadium.com/thetalkshow. Our next sponsor, the Omni Group. Yeah. Sounds like you've heard of them. Of course you have. They are one of the all-time great indie iOS and Mac developers. They go all the way back to Next. They've been around for over 25 years, and it's a rare example of steady leadership in this field, a company that just keeps on top of the game. What they want to talk about is OmniFocus for the web, which just launched out of beta. Now, what they could have done, what most people do for a web backend to a service, is they write their own web type thing, and it's a web app, and they use web technologies. And instead, what these crazy people did is they're using the same Objective-C and Swift code that OmniFocus for Mac is built with. And they're running it on Mac servers, and they just have a web output display from the same code. Crazy, right? And so for all of the consternation that people like us and all the anger we have at developers who make web apps and then put them in a shell and call it their Mac app, the Omni Group has done the right thing. They took their Mac app and now it's on the web. Super, super great. It's so very Omni to do something so nutty sounding. check out OmniFocus for the web, find out more details, how to sign up for it, et cetera, et cetera. omnifocus.com/df. That's omnifocus.com/df. Third and final sponsor, another great company I bet a lot of you guys have heard of, Slack. Slack for iOS is used by millions of people every day, including me, to stay productive, whether they're bouncing between meetings or on the go. Their iOS team is focused on a variety of projects, from connecting businesses through shared channels to inventing tools for performance monitoring at very high scale, as you might imagine from how busy they are. If you, developers, want to sweat the details and help define the future of Slack for mobile, head on over to slack.com/careers. That's slack.com/careers. iOS app. Maybe these iOS developers at Slack will be Mac developers. I don't know. That's it for business. I have a special guest to come out. Actually, I guess I have two, looks like. So without any further ado, my guests for this evening, Craig Federighi. And Greg Joswiak. You got too much on the
You are among your people, Craig.
They're all our people.
That was more applause than the Mac Pro guy. Joz, you and I talked briefly yesterday, and I said to you, first impressions after the keynote were, it was very, very exciting because you guys had so much to announce that hadn't leaked in advance. And that makes it fun, and it makes it exciting. And then I said, and it also makes me realize that when more stuff does leak, it makes my job easier because
You have more time to digest, yeah.
more time to process. And we were talking backstage. You apparently, there is one rumor, Apple rumor site that you were a fan of.
Well, which is funny, because out of context, that sounds bad, because I shouldn't like any rumor site, but there was a rumor site, and I hope John Moltz still listens to this show. You guys know what I'm talking about. Crazy Apple rumor site was like gospel for us. Phil and I and the rest of the marketing team, we read it every morning with, oh my God, what is he going to say today? And what I didn't want to tell you backstage was one of our favorites was, first of all, guys, take yourself back to 2002. All right, and remember, back then we had really one platform, Mac, right? And so we had a little bit more time to be theatrical in our keynotes. Now we're like, get moving, get moving, get moving. And so if you remember, in 2002, Steve had a very theatrical goodbye to macOS 9. Those of you who remember it, it was here at WWDC back in May. I think it was Mother's Day when we did those things, and right after. And so he had this big scene. He had dry ice and this coffin that raised out of the ground, and you don't know what's going on. You've got stained glass windows in the back, and church music's playing, and everybody's like, WTF, what's going on here? And Steve comes out and quiets the audience and begins to read a eulogy, right? And opens up the coffin, puts a big macOS 9 in it, and says his very tearful words he wrote, right? Goodbye to macOS 9. And beautiful moment, then the coffin lowers back in, and you think it's over until the next day, at which John Moltz wrote the continuation of the story. And for those that may remember, he wrote that macOS 9 started reaching back out from the grave saying, I'm not dead. And he did as he wrote, just brilliant writing that he did about the you know, how macOS 9 was trying to get back out of the coffin, and Steve was beating it back down into the coffin. And what made it even better is every week we had a weekly marketing staff with Steve, and we showed Steve this. We're like, this is just priceless. You got to read this. And so Steve reads it not just to himself, he reads it out loud. So for us, it was this continuation of his battle with macOS 9 as it's trying to say, I'm not dead yet. And Steve, it was priceless, let's say that. So then, the one last thing, and John Moltz will probably hate us saying this, but you know, Steve goes, that guy's a pretty good writer. And you know, we can always use good writers, you know, and why don't we reach out to him, see if he wants to come work at Apple? So Phil says, I'll write to him, you know, because we wrote to him on occasion. And so Phil writes to John and says, hey, any interest in coming to work at Apple? He writes back, only if I ever got really desperate. There you go.
All right, one of my jobs is to figure out what order I want to ask questions. And there was so much stuff announced yesterday that it's a struggle. But I don't want to run short on time talking about the things I'm most interested in. So I'm going to go in that order. And I can't...
The show's going to go downhill?
Yeah.
Wow.
At the end,
Well, what
like,
I
I'm not
thought
really
is-
interested in the answer to this question, but we're...
With the head of software engineering right here at our disposal for an hour, I can't think of anything better to talk about than hardware.
And you're saying that's what you want to talk about the most?
That's what's
This
most
is like
interesting
no-
to me, he
Yes,
said.
apparently.
So I'll need to introduce you to Dan Riccio at some
How many
point.
hardware engineers are in the audience? How many software engineers are in the audience? Heck yeah. All right, go ahead, ask your question.
Well, 2 years ago, Apple invited a few of us in the press out for what you called a Mac roundtable, and it was, you know, you sort of laid your roadmap ahead of us and sort of acknowledged the, as you called it, the thermal corner you'd painted yourselves in with the previous generation Mac Pro, and here's where we're going to go. You guys even said we have a Pro iMac coming before that. All of those things have now come to pass. But there was definitely, last year, when it got to the point where there was a sort of a, hey, by the way, that Mac Pro thing we're talking about, that's not really a 2018 thing, that's a 2019 thing. The reaction from a lot of people I know was sort of, why can't they just make a big tower and poop it out?
I think you're confusing us with a different computer company.
The gist of it being, if this is going to take 2 years, this better be some fancy friggin' hardware. I think that was answered. I think, you know, where have we been spending our time on this was answered in spades on Monday. I have questions, though, because I'm still not sure I understand it all. So.
You do understand the question, right?
This is not like any other computer on Earth. This is a lot of custom engineering. And the MPX module, that's Mac Pro Expansion.
Yep.
Afterburner.
Yep.
Is Afterburner, is that an MPX module, or that's a different?
No, it's its own
Standard
card.
size.
Yeah.
Right.
Programmable ASIC, so it can be reprogrammed in milliseconds.
But explain to me what that means by reprogramming it. Like what type of reprogramming?
Software stuff.
See?
Josh revealed to me earlier today that he was a computer engineer in college, so.
A long time ago. Yeah, I mean, you saw what we're using it for right now. It's, you know, it literally can process 6 billion pixels a second, right? Doing the ProRes and ProRes RAW. It's it is a burner, hence the name of what actually led to us thinking, let's call it Afterburner.
Yeah, it's essentially programmable hardware. So you're programming these gates so that then once you have that going, I mean, things are going through in virtually like dedicated hardware speed. And so that's what enables this ProRes decoding to happen at such staggering speeds and to offload the rest of the hardware to do everything.
But does that mean that at some point in the future, somebody could reprogram it to do something other than...
Absolutely.
Right, so the ProRes working with real size 5K, 8K.
Three streams of 8K. John.
3 streams of 8K. The way that that this is a great breakthrough for people who work with that sort of video, that's just one thing that you're announcing that it can be done with.
That's right.
All right.
Right.
There's more to come. I mean, I'm not
like
announcing anything, but one could imagine.
I can imagine quite a lot.
And to your point about not being painted in a thermal window, I mean, you saw the stat on this. We literally move 300 cubic feet of air through there a minute.
Yeah, be careful walking by the thing. You're just going to get completely blown out of your office.
But think about it, that's a pretty good sized room that we can push that entire airflow through in a minute if we need to. And that's what allows us to run this thing at full speed all the time, right? It doesn't have to throttle.
Right. How much are the wheels going to cost?
I mean, what really is a perfect wheel worth?
How many do you want?
I mean, yeah. How many do you need?
Well, that's the thing. I'm imagining that they're very nice wheels. I was really sort of hoping that if there were wheels in the hands-on area, I missed them. I wanted to sit there and
There was one, and there are installment plans available for wheel purchases. I'll save up.
I have been told by a reliable source.
That's how
In stark contrast to
all right, it's coming out in the fall. You guys like to keep other stuff secret. You're going to show, here's a big unveil, but you're not revealing everything. I have been told that the Mac Pro will ship with the most, quote, insane packaging that Apple has done in a while.
So who's your source?
Yeah, exactly.
You'll just have to wait to see, John.
Yeah.
But you can imagine it won't be shitty packaging.
I told this story, and again, maybe I'm just out of touch. I have since been told that there are database servers with massive amounts of RAM. But during the keynote, I was sitting next to someone from Apple, and no, it's Bill Evans from PR. It's no big deal. But when it was announced that you could configure it with up to 1.5 terabytes of memory, I just instantly assumed that it meant storage, like SSD, and I was like, well, 1.5 terabytes isn't even that much. And I said,
why are people applauding so much?
This is a curious reaction.
And I said, he didn't mean RAM, did he? And he goes, yeah, RAM. And I'm like, wait, he said 1.5 terabytes. And he said, just shut up and listen. But that's serious.
It's a lot of memory. It's a serious amount of memory.
And in my experience, that's just, from my youth onward, that's just not how computers tend to evolve. The iMac Pro, which until Monday was the fastest computer you guys have ever had announced, maxes out at 256 gigabytes of RAM, which to me sounds like enough to open some browser tabs. And so the way computers have always worked in my life is, things happen like they double. Or maybe you add another 128 and go to 384. You get these numbers like that. You don't just go from 256 gigabytes to 1.5 terabytes. That seems crazy. This machine is a sports car computer.
Well, and going back to what you said, the conference that we had way back in 2017, we knew we had to create something really special, right? And that's why this wasn't, if you ever go walking the halls of CES and you see that you can buy these chassis from Taiwan and throw a chip in them and throw an operating system on it and you're in the computer business. That isn't what we were trying to do, right? We were going to create something that was going to be really, really special and something we thought was really designed for our pro customers, including the display, right? That's just nuts in and of itself. So we knew that was going to take some time. Hence why we were trying to set the expectation, not soon.
Right. Well, speaking of the display, the Pro Display XDR is gorgeous. It is incredible. It was funny, though, doing some of the behind-the-scenes stuff with the media and getting to see some side-by-side comparisons with some competing products and this. They kept calling it the 6K display, and I couldn't tell if they were talking about the pixels or the price. I, honest to God, I thought, because usually the people from product marketing are very precisely spoken. I thought, and it was a really good presentation. It was really well rehearsed and very, like, yeah, I could see the difference. And I was like, I can't believe she keeps calling it the 6K display. Like, enough already. Stop rubbing my nose.
Off by like $1,000.
Right. The matte finish, which you're not really calling a matte finish, you're calling it a nano
texture. That's because, as you probably got the briefing, the normal matte that people do, causes this sparkle, or causes this just really weird effect on the screen. And this is a process unlike anybody's done before that, etches the glass in a way that, if you do the little test and shine a bright light on it, you see that it handles the glare in a way that no one's done before. Right, it's an incredible process that we invented to do that. And make it clear, the standard display has industry-leading anti-reflective coating, right? So it's wonderful in the base config, but if you really want the matte, the nano texture is just nuts, right?
Yeah, and side by side, if I don't know how many people got to see it side by side, but I did. And when you're looking at it straight on with no glare, they look identical. You cannot tell them apart. The color's the same, the brightness is the same. It's remarkable. And then if you angle your head in a way to kind of get like a glare, it is like there is no glare on the matte one. It is really something.
Yeah. Now, it really is a special display. The amount of engineering that went in by our display team is just incredible. Everything from the blue LEDs to how the light is literally shaped, going, through the LCD itself. You get a 1,000,000-to-1 contrast ratio, and as you heard Colleen, didn't Colleen do a great job on stage, by the way? It's extreme, that dynamic range. Yeah.
I joke about, calling it the 6K display. It is expensive.
Yep.
And I think that from what I've seen in the last 2 days, I think some people are seeing this wrong, or where it fits on the marketplace, that it is not for everybody. It is really, truly meant for people who are doing work that demands these insane specs. It's not, like...
Well, you saw the competitive benchmark, right, which is a display that we showed in the keynote. The reference, the gold standard, costs $43,000. Right. And what's amazing about it is you see them in that whole lineup you saw. That reference display can only keep the brightness up on that image for a very short period of time. The more white that's in that image, it actually has a hardware light that stays green when it's at brightness, and within sometimes seconds, it has to go amber and tell you no longer trust this image. Right? And that's the reference display at $43,000. So we've blown that away, at just over a tenth the price.
Right. Yeah, and and the message, it seems very clear that it really will enable that in a lot of seriously professional Hollywood pipelines, there's only one of those displays at the end of the chain, and footage comes out of the camera and starts going process, and isn't being looked at even by these pros on a true reference
display the very end.
Until it gets to the end, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, your shirt's the wrong color. What are you doing?
Totally true. And now everybody in the workflow can have one. So we're super proud of the work our engineers did on that. It's incredible.
All right, let's talk software.
All right.
macOS Catalina. Let's just go Mac to Mac. We'll go hardware to software.
Same thing we did in the keynote, by the way.
I know I'm going to misspeak here because the way my brain works, it's like a hashing algorithm. I'm going to confuse Catalyst with Catalina probably every time I say it, but I'll try to keep it straight. I think this was the order you introduced them, where you talked about the iTunes, and you had a great segment where you went through the history of iTunes and how simple it was in the early days and how it kept taking on more and more weight. And so now we have music, which is just music, but is born from the roots of what we knew as iTunes with the same playlists and stuff like that.
Super fast.
A podcast app, which is written using Catalyst.
Correct.
And a TV app.
Yep.
Is the TV app a Catalyst app as well? No. Huh.
Of those three, just podcasts. Yeah. Of those three, just podcasts.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, I have not installed it, so I can't say that using it does, but getting a demo and seeing it, the podcast app looks like the sibling to the music app in terms of the concerns that I've had, I know that other people have had, that what we now know is Catalyst wasn't going to let you make apps that look like a real Mac app.
Right.
And I don't think that's true at all. At least in what we see now this year.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, Catalyst certainly, well, it's UIKit API, so you've got a UI view instead of an NS view. I mean, it's a fully native framework, and we have an appropriate set of controls, and you can take advantage of all the platform features to build a really distinctive experience. So it's definitely the case that if you just push the Mac button in Interface Builder and build the app, that you're going to get some degree of Macification, but it really is for developers to take some care to do the design work to make a great Mac experience, but you don't have to at least rewrite all of your code in order to do that. So you can have one code base and one team who understands one set of frameworks to do that work. But it's a parallel native framework set for the Mac.
Can you, like, let's say you have an iOS app and you click the checkbox, add it to Mac, and then you spend some time really Macifying it and doing things that only make sense on the Mac or should be different on the Mac. Can you also call into ARKit? Or if you're a Catalyst app, you're in UIKit, and there's like a boundary?
Yeah, I mean, there's some indirect ways, like if you have a separate window in the app and you want to, and that's Inspector Palette or some other part of your app that you want to use ARKit, you can. You can't blend in the same view hierarchy, both those technologies. They run in the same process today, which is different, as I know some people who've done some teardowns of last year's technology. They ran in, thank you. Now it's one process model, so it's much tighter integration, but still it's not a blended view hierarchy. But if you have different parts of your app, you could write them.
But in loose terms, similar to in the old days when you could have a Cocoa app that called out the Carbon APIs in a certain way.
I'm not comfortable with that analogy.
Design-wise, I'm really happy to see some color coming back into the interface. Sidebar items with color. I know design trends, like any kind of fashion, they all go through cycles. But I feel like the monochrome, over-reliance on a monochrome look is just kind of got old. I don't know. There's a cheerfulness to all of the OSs that I think came out on Monday that I appreciate.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think there's a tension between deference to the main content of the window and that kind of cheerfulness that you describe. And in the case of these of the media apps, the content in the main part of the window is itself super commanding, and so actually having a colorful sidebar doesn't really compete. The Finder is a little bit of a different case, right? Where the main content of the window, if you have a list view or something, you can really have your attention drawn to a bright sidebar versus the content in the window. And so, but you're right. This is something where I think our experience and our tastes evolve over time.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a growing visual symbiosis between iOS and macOS. And I know that they've looked related for a while, but there's something about this year's releases that to me feels a little bit more coherent. And maybe I'm reading into a little bit too much with things like Catalyst and knowing that the podcast app literally shares source code with the iOS version. But they feel like they're of a family in a way that even more than ever.
Yeah, and I think that's, when we first released the first set of apps that used the Catalyst technology last year, some of the concerns that were voiced by members of the Mac community, such as yourselves, placed a certain amount on the technology that was really some design decisions we'd made. So there's certainly some things that were underlying technology behaviors, but there were other just pure design choices about sizes of items in the sidebar and where was the search field and all of those kinds of things that were different design teams kind of pushing the bounds of what is the right future for a media-oriented design on the Mac. And some people said, oh my gosh, there's this new app, it has this new design, and it's built using this technology. That must be a byproduct of the technology. Right. In fact, those were design decisions. And I think we're finding our balance now, pulling back in a couple areas there. And the underlying technology is much refined now this year. So.
Yeah, and they really are true Mac apps. You don't have to distribute them through the Mac App Store.
Right.
Same rules as
that's an implementation choice. Which frameworks you want to use to build your app is really just an implementation detail as far as the platform's concerned.
If you want a note, I believe it was you, but see, I think you scared people on stage Monday because you introduced Catalina, and then you said we look forward to seeing your great apps in the Mac App Store, and I feel like
we always got to say that stuff.
I know, right?
And we do. We look forward to seeing your great apps in the Mac.
But the paranoid among us think, oh God, they're going to make us go through the Mac App Store. But that's not the case.
No, yeah, come on, trust us, jeez. Where's this?
Another really cool, just in seeing it in person and playing with it, it just seems impossibly low latency is Sidecar. This is the new feature where you can go up to your display menu on your Mac, and if you have an iPad tied to your iCloud account, it'll show up as a target, and you can select it. The iPad will spring to life and show up as a second display on your Mac, wired or wirelessly, with extremely low latency, and it lets you use the pencil as an input in any Mac app that already supports the long-standing tablet.
Drawing tablet,
Yeah.
We agree, it's awesome.
No argument here.
There's some interesting decisions there where on the Sidecar interface, at the bottom, what you get is a virtual, the same buttons you would get if you were getting a touch bar,
right.
Even if you're running it on a Mac without a touch bar.
That's right.
Right. So whatever your app would have on the touch bar, you have all along the bottom of the iPad app, of the iPad for Sidecar. And then on the left side, you have buttons you can use for the command control option shift, so that you can, if you shift to select multiple items, just hold it with your thumb, drag a couple things, select, and you're doing this.
Yep.
But the main area of the screen is not a touch screen.
Yeah.
It takes pencil input, and you can use your mouse or your trackpad and move the mouse over, but you really are using it as a Mac display, not as a touch Mac.
Yeah, completely. I mean, we don't think you take an arbitrary Mac user interface with feature sizes and so forth that were optimized for really precise input like a mouse and throw it on a touch screen, that you're going to get a great experience there. So we're making clear that your Mac app is to be used like a Mac app. And yeah, if you have a pencil, that's a really precise instrument, and you can use that. And we really, it worked out super well that we have so many apps, including a lot of pro apps, that do take advantage of the touch bar to provide the set of controls they thought were really useful for a given context in the app, that we could put, right, that same implementation that the app has done, we could channel right onto your Sidecar display. And this is on systems like iMacs and the new Mac Pro, where, yeah, you don't have a touch bar, but you take advantage of the developer's work there in a context that makes a ton of sense. It works really well.
Yeah, it's really very impressive speed-wise.
I like it.
A huge feature to me, and it just is near and dear to my heart, is on the accessibility angle,
voice control.
And Apple has done such a great job with accessibility for as long as I can remember, and the current version of macOS and iOS lead the industry in accessibility in more ways than we even have time to delineate. But the new voice control stuff, I wasn't at the State of the Union. I was busy with other meetings, but I heard that there were on-stage demos of the voice control live in the State of the Union, and they taunted the demo gods and survived.
Well, there was, I mean, the stage environment is a tough one for voice with reverb and the speakers and all of that, and so there was one word, I think it was like send or something, that was really tough on the mics there, but it works phenomenally well. And I can say a few months ago, we had a comm meeting for the whole software organization, and someone came out to demonstrate the use of voice control, and I'm sort of backstage, ready to come back out. And I mean, there are friggin' tears in my eyes, I mean, it's one of those technologies, you just see it used, and not only are you just amazed by it, but also just realizing what it can mean to so many people. Yeah. And thinking about the passion that went into the members of the accessibility team and the Siri team and everyone who pulled that together. It's just awesome. I mean, this is some of the most touching things we do. And so yeah, I was so happy we were able to really properly show it to the rest of the world in a way that I think conveyed how much it can mean.
Yeah, and the movie featured a gentleman who obviously has some motor skill deficiencies,
right?
Or limits, however you want to say it. But my understanding is he actually, it wasn't just that you made a movie of him using it. Like, he was actually somebody who you guys consulted with and studied and took feedback from, and he'd say, yeah, but it would be better if this, and it's like, oh yeah, we all right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and members of our accessibility team, both on the core engineering and QA team and usability team, have themselves a wide range of abilities, and so we're living this in house as well, and so these technologies really impact people at Apple who are literally working on the project.
One of the demos I saw was on the Mac, and part of the great thing about this accessibility story with voice control is
on iOS.
It is on iOS too, and I think that's great, and it fits in with this theme I'm trying to have a recurring theme here. But that I feel like this is one of those things where even dark mode. Dark mode was last year on the Mac, now it's this year on iOS. This accessibility thing, here it is, they're both on the same day, and it's clearly the same, the same team is making it because you do it the same way.
That's right.
So for however different Mac and iOS input is using a mouse and keyboard or using a touchscreen, this accessibility stuff is the same, and so developers who can do it on the one platform can transfer that expertise to the other platform and be accessible there the same way.
That's right, and you'd be, I mean, this theme you're not so subtly setting as a subtext for us all. It is certainly, I mean, if you look at the beginnings of iOS, at the time the iPhone was launched, I mean, getting anything like the core components of macOS to run on that hardware, I mean, it was strip everything out you could, minimize and build, really optimized pieces to just do what was essential for the phone. But over time, the capabilities of iOS hardware have absolutely become PC class in many ways, and so over time, and this has been a many year trend, we've been able to share more and more common technology, and that meant both taking some of those great ideas from iOS, bringing them to underlying frameworks of the Mac, but taking some of the power of Mac capabilities, putting them in the underpinnings, and then as you move as high as Catalyst, you see incredible levels of sharing between these frameworks. And that's mirrored what's happened in our organization. So we have one accessibility team and one team working on voice recognition and these technologies. And so now when we build something like this, we can do one really great focused version and bring it to both platforms. There are cases like dark mode where
all three platforms.
You're right. You're right. Thank you, Jaws. Very helpful. This is why we have you here. No, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so we're able to share all this technology, and it's great to then have an organization that builds something like that and can do that. But when it comes to something like dark mode on Mojave, that was a case where having there are a lot of apps that are distinct to Mojave and distinct to iOS, and being able to have one team, one OS blaze the trail, develop a lot of the patterns and technologies, UI style, et cetera, and then be able to just follow on with what worked on iOS was a great strategy for us this time.
I saw a great demo of somebody using the voice control in the Maps app on a Mac, and they turn on a grid, and then they're showing a map, and they said, grid 16, zoom, and then it zooms, and then and it's grid 23, zoom, and all I could think of is Blade Runner. It is like I want to be able to set enhance as a synonym for zoom. But it's working. If anything, it's working faster than Blade Runner, because Blade Runner kind of made it like
have an A12.
Yeah. It was so slow because they wanted you to see how cool it was, and instead it's like the map is zooming up. I was like, this is amazing. It's I was a kid and I thought, man, I hope I live to see something like this.
Your life is complete now.
We live in interesting times.
This SwiftUI is.
Yeah.
Now is
Jaws, going into the show, Jaws wasn't sure you guys were going to like it.
Wasn't sure it was right to end the show, but boy, it did pretty well.
Now is as good a time as any to talk about it after the Mac stuff I had. But one of the fascinating things about it is it goes to 4 platforms, because it's Mac, it is iPad, it's 5, TV,
yeah, 5,
all of them, everyone.
everything.
TV, watch, iPad, phone.
And the first truly native framework for the watch.
Right, which is a huge deal. God bless WatchKit, but
We'll need to do one of those things with the coffin, I think.
Really small, very little coffin. Where's Maltz when you need him?
But being a native framework for watchOS, are you guys already using it for watch apps that you are making?
Yeah.
Like some of the new ones, like?
Calculator would be a good example.
Okay.
There are actually several on the system. I think we rewrote an app or two, and then the new things, I think we generally did them in, which that's a trailblazing team, because it was certainly a moving target. While we've been working on it for years, but as you get late in the game, we start doing a lot of things to make it just right, and that team was agile in adapting to the framework.
Well, one thing I've heard from my friends who are developers for years is that from the outside, as third-party developers, it shows which APIs you guys are using yourselves and which ones you're not. And maybe because developers like to complain, so maybe it's just one pet framework that's a little weak or something. But it's something developers talk about. And with the watchOS, the technical limitations of the original Apple Watch, and even, it's certainly the hardware's improved dramatically in just 5 years. It's understandable why WatchKit was not really a native framework, and that you guys were writing native apps at a technical level. But I think that in terms of really letting the platform blossom, having you guys using the same thing that the developers get to use is going to really enable third-party watches apps to really become something.
I think that's right. That's right. I mean, there's nothing like the internal feedback loop of your own engineering teams as you're developing the framework, saying, this isn't working for me, this doesn't perform well, I can't achieve what I need to achieve. Having that strong voice in the process, and having any limitations of anything that we're in the process of building stand in the way of an internal a strong internal voice, it makes the frameworks better. And that certainly is what we aspire to do. There have been a few cases in our history where that hasn't been it, and I think you're right to observe that we do our best work when it's work we live on.
And for watch, you got watch independent apps now. You got the App Store on your
Right.
on your watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, which definitely, and again, it's understandable, and it's, the analogy was even made on stage to iPods and even the early iPhone that I remember when I got my first iPhone and you took it out of the box and then you'd have to hook it up to iTunes and wait for AT&T that night to activate your phone. And I sat there all night long waiting for this beautiful device to say something other than waiting for activation, which went through my Mac, which, but it's bootstrapping, right?
That's right.
Right? And now the watch is taking those same steps where now you've got your own app store. I looked at the app store and I know it sounded a little crazy, but it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
The other thing.
I hope so.
No, but I mean,
That is horrible
goal.
if we let that on stage.
The goal.
I mean, it works.
It's high praise, John. It's high praise.
There's another cool feature. I don't think this made it into the keynote. I guess I'm skipping all over the place here because I want to go back to SwiftUI. But the other cool thing in the watch that I saw was that now there's a Safari view. And again, you think, what? But it goes right to reader mode and just gives you a plain text version of a website right on your watch, which is really kind of useful.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Wouldn't read the New Yorker that way.
Yeah, no. But I mean, the Safari team has been really creative in pushing on this. Actually, for a couple of years, different contexts in which we can apply their technologies and things that we built for other reasons, like reader mode. Suddenly, that opens doors to experiences that make sense on the watch. And so, I think it can be really useful for a lot of scenarios.
All right. So, is there something technical about SwiftUI that makes it more efficient, or something that justifies it being open to developers to write native apps? Or is it just sort of, this is the future, we're really proud of this work, we don't want to have baggage, let's just start with this new thing with our first native framework for developers?
I would say actually there's a blend of that. The fact that SwiftUI is a fundamentally declarative way of writing UI puts the underlying framework in much better control over the how. You specify the what you want, and the framework does a ton to figure out how that happens. It orchestrates all the animations for you. So when it comes to the efficiency of what we can do, it gives us a lot more knobs to deliver a great experience than if you just have pure UI kit. And then there's also that it was able to give us a context to just lay out the pieces of a UI framework that made sense on the watch, rather than there's quite a bit of UI kit, which under the hood is what we were using, sort of an adapted version of on the watch, that really weren't appropriate to be public. And this lets us set this beautiful green field for it. So I think both those factors conspired. And then the fact is also that when we first engineered WatchKit, the hardware of the watch, the efficiency of the processor in the watch, the nature of what we could computationally even allow to get you through the day, was extremely constrained. And so WatchKit was appropriately conservative for us to not create an interface where almost certainly an app that was even just mildly misbehaved could mean it's noon and your watch isn't working anymore.
Right.
And the hardware's come a long, long way, and that always, as the hardware becomes more capable, that opens up all kinds of doors for us on the software side, and to put more tools in the hands of developers.
So SwiftUI feels like the sort of thing that in years past, or maybe if just everything hadn't come together and there was fewer other things to announce, like if the Mac Pro hadn't been ready yet, or if the Mac Pro had been ready 6 months ago and had already been out, and there was more room in the keynote. It just feels like SwiftUI, even in the keynote, not even going to State of the Union and really getting into the tech that you can show at the State of the Union, really could have taken up more time. This feels like such a big deal to me. Like, I believe your introduction, you said that was SwiftUI you were talking about when you said these sort of transformations in the way developers work only come about every 20 years?
20, 30
20
years.
to 30
Truly,
years.
truly generational. I mean, yeah. I mean, C was, sort of late 60s, early 70s. Objective-C was the 80s. And, a lot of us are writing code in a language that was created in the 80s. And those technologies, the arc is extremely long because you end up building frameworks that take advantage of the paradigms that those languages allow. You build a whole ecosystem of technologies that go around it, and they have incredible staying power. And so for us, making a decision to go down the road we went down with Swift, this wasn't a little trivial, hey, here's a little thing on the side. This has been a long-term strategy for us. And the implications are, sure, you introduce a new language, and initially, you want to make sure it fits in with what's there. Over time, you want to take advantage of it to be everything it can be. Yep. And SwiftUI gave us, is really that step in that evolution. I mean, we do see the future of Swift and the set of frameworks that will evolve based on the strengths of Swift to be a generational kind of development for us. And to have the confluence of some great ideas about how to build a declarative UI framework, some of which have roots even going back as far as things we did at Next many years ago, to having control of a language so you could actually do an extremely concise and expressive declarative syntax for expressing these things, to having awesome control of the developer tools so that you can have an interactive experience. I mean, it takes all of that coming together to create, I think, what has all of us excited about SwiftUI.
I mentioned earlier talking about icons that fashion trends change over years, but other development trends change too. Like when macOS 10 was being birthed after the Next reunification in the late 90s, the whole industry caught like a mania for XML, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people don't. In hindsight, people are like, that's ugly,
right? Yeah.
And there's other things over the years, and when computers were much slower in the 80s, there was a reason to use binary formats for files that maybe you shouldn't have. But I feel like we collectively have come back around to the beauty of plain text. And the readability of, I'm not a Swift programmer, but I can look at the examples of SwiftUI and I see exactly what it says. It says, dot color or color equals dot blue. And, it's very, very readable and concise. The conciseness helps too.
Yeah, and I view our APIs and the syntaxes of our language to be every bit the design exercise of a user interface, right? The way you're going to express yourself in code should be as refined and thought out as anything else that you're going to interact with. And code is read much more than it's written. Right. If you can express something concisely and clearly, the next person to look at it's going to understand it. It's easier for you to maintain and evolve. But doing that well requires not shoehorning a concept on a language that never anticipated it, but having the language and the concept co-evolve, and that's what we were able to achieve.
One of the fun things at the keynote is when there's something, the WWDC keynote in particular, is when there's something that the developers get. As it was sometimes called the back of the room, right? And the back of the room erupts, and the front of the room is just like, what? And one of the...
Game controllers?
Oh, yeah. You're jumping ahead
That to me was the hidden gem. It's like, wow, the back of the room loves it.
I was backstage ready to come out, and I'm like, man, I hope that game controllers isn't what takes the day. Like, if I go out and we do SwiftUI, and they're like, well, not quite as much as connecting my old game controller.
Well, it was well ordered because we're proud to announce we have support for two very popular game controllers, and everybody was like, game controllers. And then the first one's Xbox. And people applauded, but then like the applause started rising already because they're like, wait, no.
What could number 2 be?
Right. And then when they said PS4, the room truly erupted. I mean, no offense to our friends at Microsoft, but it really seems like this is a PlayStation crowd.
Yes.
I think people were happy with both of them, John.
Both of our valued partners
Yes.
were appreciated by our audience.
One last semi-technical question about SwiftUI is, it sounds to me from what I've read and what people have dug into it is definitely way more significant. It's not a thin wrapper around UIKit and AppKit.
Right.
But it might, in some places, fall back. That, you know, and that more or less the implementation details of views are internal, and developers don't have to worry about it. Just follow the API,
Right.
and behind the scenes, maybe it'll fall back to UIKit or AppKit. Maybe it'll be something new that's implemented right in SwiftUI. Don't worry about it. It's a black box.
That's right, because a lot of times you end up having to use views in the past to achieve layout grouping and so forth. And then you're getting overhead you don't really need. Other cases you have views that make a ton of sense from a control point of view. And so SwiftUI is able to make that choice in a way that does the most efficient thing but gives you all the capability you need. And it certainly was a goal, a hard goal from the outset that we know our developers have an investment in custom controls they've created. They want to be able to build SwiftUI around a control they have. They want to be able potentially to create a component in SwiftUI that fits inside the context of an app that has a traditional AppKit or UIKit view hierarchy. And so making those worlds completely interoperate was critical, and that's going to make it really easy to adopt. And it also means all the frameworks we've built and you've built become accessible in this world. So if you've gone through the really excellent SwiftUI tutorials, isn't that, I think that the doc team, I mean, they knocked it out of the park on this. And if you go through that, at one point they're like, hey, let's use a map, like let's use MapKit, right? There's no custom work that we did to integrate MapKit into SwiftUI, but it's nearly effortless for you to take that existing, massive investment in this UIKit control and incorporate it into a SwiftUI app. So I think that's going to be huge for everyone who wants to adopt the technology. Yeah, heck yeah.
The other big like back of the room applause moment was during the demo when it was shown that how easy it is to get the UI you're working on running on an actual device.
Oh, yeah.
And you just select the word gray and type BLUE, and on the phone, the button changes from gray to blue.
Yes.
Like, the back of the room erupted, and the front of the room was like, what? Of course it changed to blue. He typed blue. Right?
Was I that obvious?
Yeah. It's like you had to have experience going through the build, install, launch cycle, and then you realize, and especially in the earlier days of iOS development when everything was a little slower, our computers were slower, and Xcode was slower, and the transfer might have been a little slower, and the phones were slower, and then you're like, shit, I was supposed to change the color to blue, I forgot, right?
One of my coworkers was saying she talked to her mom, and her mom and dad had sat down and watched the keynote, and she's talking to her mom, and her mom says, there was this point when Dad just kept yelling at the TV, "Oh my God, oh my God!" She's like, I'm not sure what was happening, but it really seemed to speak to him, and he was an engineer. So, yes, there are things that if you've ever gone through the normal cycle, you realize that if you can iterate that fast, that you're just going to pursue more ideas, you're going to try more things, you're going to end up with a better result, right? You're going to be more creative. And so accelerating that cycle is so important. And that really did take the work between the compiler team, the IDE team, the language, the way the frameworks work to achieve what in the end should feel, it should work that way, right? But I got to say, as we did preview this for some members of the front of the room internally. I think there was a degree as we're going through it, except for Jaws, of nodding. Because they're, like you said, they're looking at the code and they're going, I think for the first time I understand what looks like code. So that was a good sign.
Right. Yeah. I think I know how I could change that to red.
Yeah, exactly. I can do that.
Well, I'm so happy that this shipped. I was asked earlier today, what is my favorite announcement so far? I'm not even a developer. I just think it's very cool. I can't wait to dig into it. I think SwiftUI is my favorite software.
All right.
I really. So tvOS has multi-user support now.
Yep. At a new control center, which is how you change users.
Are there
Support for PlayStation game controllers.
Yeah. Are there any other platforms that you think could use multi-user support?
Is the TV not enough for you, John?
Yeah, jeez. None that I can think
TV's
of.
meant for it, right? You sit in a family, you sit on a couch, you get different people who use that same TV. Come on, it's perfect.
Everyone should buy their own devices. Want to
Yeah, I'm trying to think what other devices families might have in their living room that other people use, but I'm drawing a blank.
No. Me too.
You can do multi-user with iPad in education. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
It works great. I see Michael Chow in the crowd cheering.
Is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidental timing that this is the year where you support Xbox and PlayStation game controllers, and it's also the year when Apple Arcade is coming in the fall?
That's probably, I mean,
You're saying is that coincidental?
coincidental?
Yeah.
No, I think it makes a
that's
lot of
very
sense.
planned,
Yeah.
These things don't happen on accident, John. There are a lot of games there that are going to play great with a controller.
Yeah, and
I think
we
we
wanna make
applied
sure
that
we have two of
heavily
the
by
best and
saying
most-
Apple Arcade, and here's some new game controllers.
Yeah.
It was like, we connected those two concepts.
Yeah, we tried our best.
I mean, that was marketing.
I was going to say we're moving fast, but that's Tim's part. That's, to that point, I don't want to say a little bit,
All right.
embarrass him. To your point of we could spend longer on these things, we could spend longer on everything, right? When we first put these keynotes together, they're about 3 hours. And there's another company in our neighborhood who tried that a couple times. It doesn't go over well, right? So we try to keep it around 2:15, give or take, which we've run the last few years at, and we figure that's as long as we can go. So we run things down to the minute. So when we're creating slides, we have to figure out how many roughly slides can we create so we get in the ballpark of knowing how much time. So what our Marcom team has done a brilliant job of is they have mapped every presenter over the years and how many slides they can do a minute.
It's like a baseball card.
It's like so I won't out the slower people, but the fastest one by far. But I give him a little bit of grief because in his prime, Craig could do 9 slides a minute. He's slowed down to about 7 slides a minute as he's getting a little older. But I think he still does a pretty good job.
I feel like you guys have been holding me back lately. We get out of rehearsal like, we did not see the image on the screen. You can't just yell a word and push next.
So, yeah, actually, he does. I think we'd all agree he does a brilliant job up there.
Oh, definitely. Do you guys, I don't know why I never asked this before, do you guys click the slides yourselves? Like,
Yes.
I know you always,
That's that thing I'm
Right.
doing.
right.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? I mean, it would be freaky to have someone else do it.
That did happen in rehearsal at one point.
Oh, yeah. We had something where we're out there, and then someone backstage is
Tim
like
is like,
pushing
what
the
is going on with
button,
my
and-
slides? They're
Yeah.
moving forward. And after rehearsal, Kevin Lynch admitted he was backstage playing with the clicker.
What does this thing do?
They are live clickers, yes.
All right, let's go. iOS 13.
Yes.
What can you tell me about this new packaging format that makes downloads smaller? Like, I kind of get that you could do something on the server side and take out resources. Like, if you're running on a 2x Retina device, you could take out 3x resources or something and do something. But that apps launch twice as fast?
Yeah, isn't that crazy? That was quite a discovery for us. Sometimes you just stumble into something and you take it. No, just kidding. No, it turns out that over time, as in terms of the way the apps were encrypted and the way fair play worked and so forth, the encryption became part of the critical path, actually, of launching the apps. I mean, the processors are capable of ripping through the thing that actually it was a problem. And then there are other optimizations that, based on what was visible to the system at certain points, we couldn't pre-bind certain things. And so it actually cut out optimization opportunities. And so when we really identified that opportunity, we said, okay, well, we can actually come up with a better format that's going to eliminate that being on the critical path. It's going to enable all these pre-binding things. And then we did a whole bunch of other work to optimize the Objective-C runtime, to optimize the linker, the dynamic linker, a bunch of other things. And you put it all together, and yeah, the cold launch. We've never had a win like this to launch time in a single right. release, and so it's fantastic. I can't wait for those videos where people do this. Those videos, like, that defines the performance of a phone, right? They're like, watch this. This is what you do all day. Okay, we'll win one of those. Which phone is faster? Sorry, if you're in the audience, whoever that dude is.
Wait till they write about you tomorrow.
You know, I've watched those videos. I've watched those videos too, and then you watch them, and then sometimes you look over on the side, and they show you in the sidebar other videos from the same creator, and it's like, oh my God, this guy makes one of these every week with other phones.
Right.
And it's like, oh my God, once a week he's doing this thing.
That's his thing. He's the guy.
Kind of like Will It Blend. Yeah.
The Photos app clearly has a major upgrade for iOS this year. It just has to be among the most used apps on the platform around the world. I mean, and it's a real problem, exactly as pitched on stage. That all right, now you've had this phone for all these years, and you've maybe had other digital cameras, and you've put them in your same iCloud photo library, and you've got, I don't know, I've got like 28,000 items in my iCloud photo library, something like that. I don't know, it's ridiculous. How do you surface them? Right. Yeah. How do you surface them? And I really, really think that this like month, year interface to collecting these things really seems smart. And this is an instance where the big bet you guys have made on machine learning in recent years on device is really showing its effects, because it's not, it's not just collecting them by month. That's easy. It's this, here's the best ones. Yeah. Here's 3 that are almost exactly the same. We'll just show 1 for now so that you're not seeing it all. And that's all through the machine learning. Yeah, this is another one where we're in the meeting, and Justin TD, this was his real photo library. Which was awesome. I don't know if you guys noticed that in the keynote.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that Justin and his entire family are gingers helps. Yes. They were saying, we have no understudy for this. We've got nobody. No. Yes.
But he obviously as a member of the leader of the photos team takes a lot of pictures, but and as a proud father, obviously takes an unbelievable number of photos. But he's there demoing it and going through it, and he starts paging back through the life of his child, going backwards, and we're all sitting here like trying to avoid looking at each other because we're tearing up. I mean, and I literally had that experience myself, where I opened it and I'm seeing like my children, and I go back and back, and then I have 2 of them, and then there's 1 of them, and then there's my wife and I at the altar, and I'm just like, it was crazy. And you just never have those experiences in this just sea of photos. But that, the team has gotten so much more advanced over the last several years in not just saying what's a good photo, that's a piece of it. What's a good photo? What's the arc of a meaningful event for you and a story? And then looking at across big spans of time, what were big events that were important to you? I mean, intuiting all of that is an art, and one that, yes, if we were all to do that thing that maybe back in the old days with iPhoto, you'd go try to tag things and organize and build the albums, like you might have done it, but now we're taking so many more photos, it's just totally impractical, and you get it for free. And then, I think, like many of us, my wife must wonder when suddenly she gets these flurry of iMessage photos from our past, and our children coming at her, and it's because I'm using the app and I'm literally like rediscovering my photo library and going, oh my God, this is so great, and sharing, and it has that effect on you. And it's the toughest feature in some ways. I mean, I hope the demo came across, but it's in a way the toughest feature to really get across the meaning, because you have to see it with your own photos, because suddenly that all becomes, you're like, oh my God, this is it for me. You see someone else's photos, you're like, nice family, Justin, but other than that, it's like, I don't know, but the emotional resonance of your own photos, it's incredible.
Justin did a brilliant job too.
And he did.
And it was touching, because Craig's exactly right. When you put your own photos in this is when you melt. But I thought that came across still in Justin's demo really well, because, we do spend so much of our time taking these pictures, and for years people didn't look at them. Right, and we've given you more ways every year to expose these, including memories, right? That come, it's brilliant. So,
and it ties back to a question, a topic that you and I have talked about, maybe on this stage 2 years ago, maybe back in San Francisco, but probably more back in San Francisco, because I think that was a little bit more, at least from our perspective outside, where you guys really were committing to this machine learning and becoming best of industry at AI stuff. And there's a strong sentiment held by many people out there that this on-device strategy is doomed to failure because there's other companies that do it all in the cloud, and theirs works, and so therefore the cloud is the only way to make it work. And you and Phil, when he's been here, I've asked this question. Are you convinced that this on-device, let the billion iPhones out there do this machine learning in a distributed fashion on all of this amazing hardware that's out there being used? You committed to it, and you're
oh, totally. Yeah. And in fact, if you watch recent events from the other guys, you'd be surprised how many times they've started to say on-device machine learning. I mean, they're actually seeing the light a little bit on that topic. But I think they're disadvantaged in the sense that part of what makes this possible is building great hardware and having a consistent baseline of great hardware that's capable of this. And you look at
the integration of that hardware.
And the integration of the hardware and the software, because if you have to try to pull this off over this, random fleet of different devices of different capabilities, it's really tough to provide a decent experience. And you look at the A&E in the most recent iPhones, it's astounding what you have to work with there and how they can what they can do with processing photos on device, even doing the kind of voice synthesis that you saw with the neural TTS. We can do that on the A&E. It's just incredible, where you're actually generating literally through a network. Every sample in the waveform of the voice is being, sort of hallucinated in real time out of the network, and it's incredible. So this stuff has legs.
Yeah, and it really is starting to show. And you're starting to see it in other places too, like in the sharing sheets, where the sharing sheets now have recommended guesses as to who you might want to send this to.
And how you want to send it.
Right.
Yeah, and we didn't make that clear, but maybe you often, with this kind of content, you email it to this person, you iMessage it to this person, you WeChat it to this person, and that combination is one tap, and that makes a huge difference just in terms of your desire to think like, hey, I'm going to do this because this is going to be fast and easy, and it turns out we can do a really great job figuring out where you're going to shareware.
Yeah, and in some ways, being local has advantages where the iOS knows which apps you're using. You know, the operating system on your device knows that you use WeChat, and
Right.
Yeah. The cloud doesn't know what you do on your phone.
Yeah, and honestly, having your device know you is cool. Having some cloud person know you is creepy.
iPadOS, we have a new OS.
Michael goes crazy, starting to wave out there.
Tell me the thinking. Why change the name to iPadOS now? What pushed it over the edge in 2019?
Yeah, and I'll say, I
kind of
think
the wrong metaphor.
this one, you know, even though it's a marketing thing, I think engineering. I mean, marketing gets to name things at Apple, but engineering felt very strongly on this one because we've been on this trajectory for the iPad from the outset, co-evolving with this incredibly hardware that's been getting incredibly more and more advanced over time, and has been enabling more and more software experiences. And so,
To that point, our worst nightmare was it's a big iPod Touch.
right.
That was never the iPad experience.
No, and in fact, you know, from a UI design perspective, the very first iPad had these incredibly distinct experiences visually and taking advantage of the canvas at the time. But as the experience went on, and we started saying, well, how do you want to what do you want to do with a device that has these kinds of characteristics? How are you? What's the right kind of interaction model? And things like split view and slide over and drag and drop and Apple Pencil started to be a factor. And then you start to see Apple and third-party developers really start to take advantage of that and tailor the experience. Well, when we think about a platform, when you think about a name, what makes tvOS tvOS? I mean, under the hood, there's a lot of iOS in there. Why don't we call that like iOS for TVs or something like that? Well, because it defines an experience, right? tvOS means there's a 10-foot experience. watchOS means it's an experience optimized for your wrist. iPadOS has evolved to have an experience that has its own distinct nature to the point that it deserved to be recognized in that way. And when you put some of the next set of changes that, you know, along the path that we are steadily on, we felt like we just crossed to the point where it was just silly to no longer say, this is its own thing. Sure, technically it shares all these underpinnings, but fundamentally we're communicating to users. There's a distinctive experience here, and we're communicating to developers. Like if you build an iPad app, you should support, if you're a document-based app, you should support multiple windows. You should support drag and drop. That's what it means to be a great iPadOS app.
Well, and I think it was a good reminder, at least a lot of the coverage that a lot of the coverage today was very positive on iPadOS, and a reminder that the other guy's tablet experience really isn't a tablet experience, right? It was nothing but big phone experience, and that's a huge advantage for iPad. It is a real experience that is very distinct and unlike anything in the industry.
And what struck me from a lot of the demos, not just like Notes and Mail, but even like the Microsoft Office iPad apps, is that 2 up is sort of a magic number. You know, like one, you know, like the iPhone has always been a single screen device. You launch an app, it gets the whole screen, and the iPad started that way and has sort of evolved with more multitasking screen arrangements. But 2 is sort of a magic number, like the old version, the new version. You want them side by side, you know, and you know, like, so it hasn't evolved in a way. It hasn't aped to the Mac and you can just hit Command-N 10 times and make 10 text edit windows.
Right.
Not appropriate for the iPad experience and the precision of the control. But having 2 up it just seems like a huge breakthrough for a lot of use cases.
With a slide over when you need something to slide.
Yeah, it totally is. And then, you want to get at that one extra thing for quick moments. You have slide over. I mean, I think for many of us, really in a very organic way, iPad has taken more and more of our time, and you should have every device, buy every one of them, and use them for all the right jobs. But but iPad is just it's such a great combination of characteristics for so many activities that I think things like split view and slide over make a big difference.
I try not to make the mistake of ever telling an engineer this should be easy, with this idea, right?
It's just typing. I say it all the time.
Yes.
And now I see SwiftUI, it's not even typing.
But that said, USB drives and SD card support, finally?
Yeah.
But I think there's more to this than just putting a USB stack in the OS.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we there was. You're right. We, from a security architecture point of view, we did not want to have file system drivers running in the kernel, communicating with external media that could be potentially tampered with. And that's what you're dealing with when you're talking about plugging in external media into a device like the iPad. And so getting all of our file systems to be isolated from the kernel, and we didn't want to just support the MS-DOS file system or something, right? So we wanted APFS support, the whole thing, getting all those file systems in a place where they fit with the iOS security architecture, and doing the same for SMB and so forth. It was a real hardcore engineering effort, and so we didn't want to launch it until we could have the complete story and have it secure in the way that people expect from iOS.
I'm excited about the fonts.
Yeah.
Right? And I mentioned this on my show recently, but I think there's a similar angle there on the security front, which is, and one part of me wants to say, oh my God, this iPad is so old and it's so beautiful, and I can't believe I can't install custom fonts easily yet. But there is a security angle there because modern fonts, that type, open, what's the format? Open type and true type. They're software programs.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's part of the thinking of why this was considered for many years before we've had this.
Well, having them, certainly you're right that as an attack surface, fonts are something that has been exploited over time, and one where we put a bunch of effort into hardening. But the other factor is being able to have them go through the App Store, meaning that those fonts aren't something that are going to be coming at you willy-nilly, is very helpful in this architecturally as well. So, but I think this was a matter of something that we could have done in the past. It wasn't that suddenly the stars aligned from a possibility point of view, but from a priority point of view. iPad's become more and more a device where you're going to be doing those kinds of things, and you're going to want that kind of capability. When you put together things like all the capabilities with files, all the kinds of more creation-oriented apps that have grown up in that around iPad, it became I think became a necessity, something we felt we really needed on the platform.
Yeah, it seems like. Again, the keynote was like, we're moving, but it seems to me from getting a little bit of hands-on time with it that I don't know if it was completely rewritten, but seriously rethought text selection and moving the insertion point, and when it's going slow, you're going character by character, and you can drag over on the, like off the margin, and it just goes down to the end of lines, and it just does so many more useful things, and you don't need a magnifying glass anymore, and you can select, that seems like that was a big deal, and it sort of feels like something that iOS never really got right before. Like text selection and manipulating the text selection always has felt a little more fiddly than it ought to be, and I have had no idea how to fix it, but it just felt a little fiddly.
No, we agree. I think it is one of those areas that in the past you felt like this is harder than doing it on a Mac, right? That I'm using an iPad and I'm feeling like, gosh, I just want to cut and paste something, and this is much harder. And I think when we first introduced text selection and copy paste and undo on iPhone, Part of it was just, it was extremely, let's teach you how to do this in a really kind of overt, demonstrative way. You're going to put your finger down, tap, you're going to get a big magnifying glass. Okay, we all get what's going on here. I mean, there was almost an instructional element to the interface, but it was also very heavy. Yeah. And so getting to the right solution here, I'll tell you, it's been something we have taken runs at for multiple years and come back and felt like we don't yet have it, right. And those are things where you don't just throw it against the wall. I mean, you do internally, you throw it against the wall, but externally, we wanted to get it right, and it took a lot of careful craftsmanship to get it right. You have this problem where, okay, I'm going to tap on it, so my finger's now covering the evidence of the thing that I did. Where does the cursor go? If it hops up above the finger, then it's not where I thought it was. If it's under the finger and then I try to move down, well, I never see it. And so if you start to study the subtleties of what we had to do to make it feel like, oh, it works like you'd expect, it actually, the mechanics are pretty tough. But I think we got it.
And part of that, this might be easier if I go to my Mac. Like cut, copy, paste is one of those things where I'm sure every single person in this room can do cut, copy, paste without thinking about what their fingers are doing. You just learn to do it. And the three-finger gestures feel like they're going to get like that. If you use your iPad, you're going to just pick that up and you're going to start like
you're picking up the tab.
Yeah. But my concern, I'm wondering if you're worried, my concern is by being three-fingered gestures, are you worried that it's a discoverability problem? That how are people going to know that they can do these things very easily?
It might be, but that's why we always provide. I mean, I think Command-C. Heck, I mean, when I send emails, right, it's like Command-Shift-D, right? I don't think everyone in my family does Command-Shift-D, but I do it 1,000 times a day, and so It's okay. Part of what we've given ourselves permission to do over time is to say the iPad experience has to be, the experience that a young child or a first-time elderly computer user can walk up to and understand, not get themselves in trouble. But at the same time, there can be depth to the platform that you can discover and you can become a pro and really accelerate your work. And so the iPad is perfectly usable to do cut, copy, paste in the traditional way, tap on it, up comes a call-out bar, tap, copy. And we're totally fine with many users doing that, just like we're fine with people going up to the edit menu and clicking, and pulling down and doing copy. But just like keyboard accelerators, these gestures will become, I think, just complete muscle memory for many of us, and will accelerate what we do.
Yeah, just a serious reduction in mental friction because you're just doing your thing and you're not thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's funny, we tried many different kinds of gestures, and some of them on paper seem like, oh, well, this is going to be great. And it's interesting that just how in your mind it became this idea of I'm almost picking something up to copy and putting it down to paste. We found that people could learn it and perform it much more reliably than a bunch of other gestures. And so, funny how the brain works.
All right, we're getting close to the end, so we got to enter the speed round. Pencil. Latency support on the iPad Pro has gone from 20 milliseconds to 9 milliseconds. That seems crazy to me in a software update. That sounds to me like the pitch from the next iPad Pro, that it's a hardware thing. Like, that's a huge reduction. That's crazy.
Well, so there's a piece of it that is optimization and just scheduling the TrueMotion display, getting in at exactly the right moment to get the draw commands in and recognize the input and so forth. And part of it is prediction, and it turns out that the human hand can only accelerate at a certain part. If you're going to start to turn, you're going to sense the second derivative of motion is going to so you can actually run the math on that. And in fact, we had one part where we turned the prediction up, so instead of trying to guess where you were going to be, we pushed it way ahead. So it would actually predict before, it would be running ahead of your pencil. and if you pushed it far enough, you could just put the pencil down and it would just write your whole message. It's very good. It's negative latency. That's next release, so you keep that amongst us, but that's where it's going.
If you're our competitors at this point, ignore everything you heard.
ARKit had a significant amount of time in the demo, and ARKit 2 is like a huge upgrade over ARKit 1, and ARKit 3, 1 year later, is all of a sudden occluding people live on the device.
That's a pretty nice applause from the AR developers out there.
And I've played with it, and it is uncanny. It is really, really crazy.
And that's machine learning. I mean, really the techniques in order to figure out what's a person, where's the person, what are these pixels or people pixels, is a task actually that amazingly, with the right algorithms and the right training, we can do. And what's incredible is you can, we had some things where we'd like color the hand or color the person, and you sort of get it when person would walk out in front and it'd figure out where the person was. But when you go like this and you get the tip of your shoe and it goes, that's part of a person. You stick a finger in, like it's pretty incredible how it can recognize people parts.
Don't push it too far. Don't push it too far.
The training set had boundaries.
You know what you've caused.
A lot of testing?
A lot of testing.
All right, Craig, I need you.
I'm sorry. Damage control.
I need you to explain to me the difference between ARKit and RealityKit.
Yeah, they're quite distinct. So RealityKit is a full AR-oriented 3D rendering engine. So, and it's not just a rendering engine, it's a physics engine, it's an animation engine. Right. So it was designed from the outset to be focused on AR. So the objective of its rendering techniques are about making things look real. And part of that are things like, a perfectly rendered object that doesn't have the same noise characteristics as what's coming off the camera stands out, right? If you move and some things are blurring because they're real and the AR object looks strangely fixed there, then it doesn't look real. And so we did things like motion blur and noise as part of the rendering. ARKit is the thing that's providing understanding of the world, the planes in the world, doing VIO, so understanding between the accelerometers and tracking through the camera textures on the ground and stuff to understand what the geometry of the world is so that a 3D engine like RealityKit can go render objects in there. And the two of them are super tightly integrated because some of what ARKit is perceiving about, for instance, ambient light and understanding that, the way you should be lighting the object that you're rendering should take into account all these factors to make it fit in the real world. So the two are really complementary in that way. And then Reality Composer is a 3D creation environment that's kind of, it's sort of interface builder and Keynote in 3D. So you can lay out all your objects, but then you can also, in a Keynote sort of fashion, easily assign behaviors and animations to them. So it makes it very accessible.
The demo I saw of Reality Composer, again, talk about an app that got short shrift in the Keynote. I mean, this app is amazing. It is like, clearly a lot of work went into this, almost certainly years. I know you guys don't want to talk about how long, but this is like a full-fledged 3D development creation app with all the features if you've used any kind of creation app like Keynote or, come on. We're not sloppy drinkers here. Come on, hold your beer. Just 1.0 is a really, really rich, deep app, and in a market where the competing apps like Maya and these things are. There's literally only like a few thousand people in the world who know how to use them because they're so opaque and require. It's like airplane. Find an airplane with all these buttons and stuff. And this is a total Apple-y app that you can just say like, here, make a thing and make it gold and make it bounce. And it's,
the goal, you got it. I mean, the goal was to take this thing that was pretty arcane and very, very, very specialized skill and say, how do we make this the kind of thing that makes this sophisticated 3D technology accessible to software engineers and designers who aren't 3D experts but want to incorporate this kind of stuff in their apps. And so that was the design goal from the outset. The team did incredible work there, and I think the ability also to do it on the Mac, but not just that, but to then transfer to take the experience and do it on your iPad while you're actually experiencing AR, edit it in AR, have that sync back automatically to the Mac, so you're evolving your project like that. I think that's going to be change, not just make an existing thing easier, but it really even change who can do what in the world of building 3D apps.
Which is the beauty of AR and ARKit to start with, right? Is we opened up AR to a bunch of people, hopefully a bunch of you, that never would have done AR, right? And now they can put AR into their apps. And we have over 7,000 in the App Store right now and growing, which is about 7,000 more than there would have been otherwise.
Yeah. And what you said about how short it was, I mean, you can imagine the original version of the deck had us, spending 15 minutes talking about Reality Composer and another, and then we got down to where we had a cover slide where I said, it's Reality Composer, and then I have one slide with this animation, and I had like a few things I was going to say, and we go through rehearsal, and I say, Reality Composer, it's great, you can drag and drop and edit 3D, and Mike Rockwell's like, could you add like 4 more words about it? I'm like, I got to check with Jaws. He's got his stopwatch out, whether they're going to allow these, when you have that much to talk about, well, I think the great thing is, developers are all going to follow up. You're going to dive deep.
We have over 100 sessions at WWDC. That's the beauty. We have 200 labs, so we have more time to engage with, real engineers on this stuff, but, people got to pee. So we can only, we can only keep them there for so long. Which I think your audience is starting to experience.
Yeah, we're getting there. Let me end here. Final card is security and privacy related stuff. And from
what I hear, every company in the Valley is now the protector of your privacy.
It's become
I don't know.
It's become a more popular word,
isn't it?
Including from some companies that have said in the past that you have no privacy.
Yeah.
Like, that's an unusual thing to say. That makes me uncomfortable. The sign-in with Apple is a thing that, it's an idea that seems kind of obvious, and 1,000 people have had it, and they've said, boy, Apple could do that, and it would be awesome, but they probably wouldn't do it. And now you've done it. And it is, it really seems,
Well, and a lot of you guys are the ones that asked us to do it, right? It was developers that were saying, look, we need a frictionless way to authenticate users into our app. We don't know what's going on with this data about our customers that we're surrendering to somebody else. Can you do it and do it in your Apple sort of way? And that's what this team stepped up to do.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've downloaded an app, it comes up with one of those, I close, delete. You just never even experienced that.
I've done it. Yeah. And it is true that once you have it, you can see though what the appeal was originally with people using single sign-on is that, there's so many 1,000 ways you can screw up security. Here's these big companies, they've been through it all, they've made all the mistakes. You can kind of trust them on the security level. It's the privacy issue where the trust comes in. And it's ease of use, right? It's like, here, I might go outside the hall and I'm going to get one of these scooters that you can scoot around on. And it's like, I've never used it before. And it's like, if I've got to send my email and then wait for the email arrive and then to click through the email, it's like, I'm just going to walk, Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's an appeal to that. I think that's why one of the scooter companies was one of the demos you guys showed using it, that you can go hit sign in with Apple, it Face IDs you, and now you're scooting.
Yes.
But your information about you is not.
I thought something. So one of the things, it's not a secret. It's in the small print, or it looked small to me, but it's in the description of using it that come fall, any app that uses a third-party sign-in service will have to offer sign in with Apple as one of the options. And at first, I think the reaction was, ooh, that's a little heavy-handed. And then Because it just seems like you're issuing a dictum, you're bossing people around. But you think if you give it any thought, it just makes sense for everybody involved.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, again, going back, developers are the ones that first asked us to do it. At a customer level, I mean, customers, when it comes to privacy, you want transparency and control, right? You want the customer to know what information are they giving to somebody, and they want the control of whether to do that or not. In the situation of these buttons, there's no transparency. People had no idea what kind of information was flowing through that single tap. And so what we wanted to do is provide that transparency and control, right? The normal authentication, there's no information flowing. Yeah, maybe they're here. In the event that the developer wants that additional information, you see what's going to go to them, right? You see the name and you can edit it. You see that it's your email, unless you choose to hide it, and that we've given the randomized email address. So we have that transparency. That transparency and control. So in the event that an app is providing those means to log in through a social networking, then we say we should offer customers this more private choice. If they're not doing that, right, they just have their own authentication, their own system of logging in, they don't need to do this, but it's just a matter of, in this situation, we want to give those users that transparency and control as a way to authenticate.
Yeah. And there's privacy, the stuff, you guys have been talking about it more. I really think it's true. I don't think it's any kind of change of heart or change of course from Apple strategically. I think Apple has always had this in mind and really has never been interested in hoovering up personal data about its users. It's just become culturally something that people, even if you're not Apple customers, people just talking about all sorts of stuff in the tech industry are suddenly sort of dawning on them that we've been living through a privacy apocalypse for the last 15
and I like to say, John, and you've heard me say it before, we've been doing privacy since before it was popular. Right? I mean, we were building it into our systems and building what we do when no one outside of Germany seemed to care. The Germans care a lot. And we were doing it because we knew it was the right thing to do. And you've heard Craig say it, you've heard Tim say it, privacy is a fundamental human right. And whether it was popular or not, we were going to do it. And fortunately, it's gotten more popular, which has been a good position for us since we've worked pretty hard on it over the years.
This really goes, all the way back to the origins of the company. The Apple was created to be the personal computer company. And remember, the competition was some kind of time-shared mainframe, have all your data somewhere else. And the idea of you can have your own computer, got your own diskettes, and you got your stuff. It's yours. Right, and that's at the core of who we are. And if you look at some of these other companies, that's clearly not at the core of who they are. And we're also a company where our idea is we're building stuff that we would want for ourselves, that we would want for our families, our children, our friends. And I don't want to be tracked. I don't want my family to be tracked, right? So we've always been wanting to build this stuff because we just think it's the right thing to do. And there was a time where everyone's saying privacy is dead and you guys are so naive and why do you care about this and is this disadvantaging you? And no, it's just right.
We can't top that.
I
think let's call that a show. Thank yous. I have a bunch of people to thank. Let me thank Craig and Jaws for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
Every single year, I spend my Tuesday at WWDC saying, why do I do this? I'm a nervous wreck. And then it's over, and I'm like, well, that was fun. What are you guys doing next month? We could do this all the time. This is great. There's other people at Apple, and I know, that there's all sorts of people at Apple who help make this possible, help get these guys here. I want to thank somebody who has a big part in doing WWDC. His name's Nitin Mishra. And Nitin, he's probably mad at me that I'm thanking him, but he literally brought these chairs from infinite loop in a pickup truck.
I thought I recognized it.
Yeah. They're very nice chairs. I just wouldn't be comfortable up here if we didn't have nice chairs. And so,
That's awesome.
That is like the least of what he's done. So he's really done a great job. I don't know that this show would be possible without him. As always, I want to thank the wonderful staff here at the California Theater. They are such nice people. Oh my God. I'm a big believer in Murphy's Law. I figure everything's going to go wrong. The lights aren't going to work. The sound's not going to work. And nothing went wrong. So I really can't believe it. I want to thank Tito.
John, they forgot to hit record.
It looks like Syracuse has captured it all, though.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We've been trying to suck our souls into that thing.
I want to thank Tito, ti.to, the ticketing service I use, run by my friend Paul Campbell, and it's a great team. Really a great service. I don't know what I would do without it. I probably wouldn't have a show, or I'd make somebody else sell the tickets. I want to thank the sponsors. Mac Stadium, a great hosting service to get your Mac hardware or use their Mac hardware in truly pro data centers. OmniFocus from the Omni Group, now available on the web in the craziest way possible, which is beautiful. It really looks great. And Slack, who are hiring iOS engineers, and iOS engineers might soon be Mac engineers.
That's right.
We should start calling them UIKit engineers, really.
I think so.
And some of my friends who helped me do this show, Marco Armend is up there with a live audio stream. For the 5th year in a row, Jake Shoemaker is shooting the video, which will be out soon. I don't know how soon, but hopefully tomorrow. But he does a great job, makes us all look good. My friend Caleb Sexton, who edits my show every week, the audio is up there making sure we sound good and make sure our mics are on and all of that.
Yeah.
And
Hooray for Caleb.
Our very fine announcer, Paul Kafasis, good friend. And my wife, Amy. Half of you probably already got help from her. It was like 5 minutes before the show, and there was something minor wrong, not major wrong, and Jaws just turned to her and goes, you do everything.
And she agreed.
Yeah, she did. But I really don't know what I would do without her. My thanks to her. She does a great job. And last but not least, of course, all of you in the room, on the internet. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, sir. All right. Thanks for coming out.